The security camera footage would later show everything in stark black and white. Frame 047. An old man in a worn baseball cap approaches the counter. Frame 048. Two young men enter behind him. Frame 049. The first shove. But the camera couldn't capture what mattered most. It couldn't record the Purple Heart medal pinned to that faded cap, or the tremor in the cashier's voice when she whispered, "Please don't hurt him." Welcome back to our channel, where we share the untold stories of America's heroes. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. These stories need to be heard. Before we dive into what happened that night at Murphy's gas station, I want you to do something. Write in the comments how old you are and what city you're from. You'll understand why this matters by the end. Frank Garrison had been stopping at Murphy's gas station every Tuesday for 3 years. Same time, 9:47 p.m. Same routine. Fill up his '98 Chevy. Grab a coffee, maybe exchange a few words with Maria, the night cashier. She was a good kid. 22, working 2 jobs to support her grandmother. Reminded him of his daughter, if his daughter still talked to him. The Purple Heart on his baseball cap wasn't for show. Frank earned it in Kandahar when an IED turned his Humvee into twisted metal and sent shrapnel through his left leg. That was 12 years ago. Before the nightmares, before the pills, before his family decided that living with a broken soldier was too much trouble. Evening, Maria. Frank placed exact change on the counter for his coffee. Always exact change, always polite. "Hi, Mr. Frank. How's the leg tonight?" Still attached. It was their usual exchange. She smiled. He almost did. That's when the door chimed and everything changed. The 2 young men who entered weren't from the neighborhood. Designer clothes, expensive sneakers, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Early 20s, maybe. The blonde one had his phone out, recording. The dark-haired one was already staring at Frank's cap. "Look at this," the dark-haired one said, loud enough for the whole store to hear. "We got ourselves a real live baby killer." Frank's hand tightened on his coffee cup. Don't engage. That's what Dr. Reynolds had taught him. Walk away. But his feet wouldn't move. "Purple Heart," the blonde one read from his phone screen, still recording. "Bet you got that from murdering kids in Afghanistan, didn't you, old man?" Maria stepped back behind the counter. Frank could see her hand moving toward the panic button. Good girl, smart girl. "I'm just trying to buy coffee," Frank said quietly. "Just trying to buy coffee," the dark-haired one mocked. "You hear that, Tyler? Grandpa here thinks he can just waltz around wearing his little murder medal like he's some kind of hero." Tyler kept the phone steady. "My dad says guys like you are why the Middle East hates us. Says you're all just psycho killers who couldn't hack it in the real world." Frank's jaw tightened. 12 years of therapy. 12 years of learning to control the rage, the flashbacks, the urge to show these kids what a real soldier looked like when pushed too far. But he'd made progress. He wasn't that man anymore. He turned to leave. "Where you going, hero?" The dark-haired one grabbed Frank's shoulder. "We're not done talking." "Please," Maria said from behind the counter. "Just let him go." That's when Tyler turned the phone on her. "You defending this psycho, sweetheart? You like dating murderers?" "I'm calling the police." Maria reached for the phone. The dark-haired one vaulted over the counter faster than Frank had expected. Youth. Speed. 2 things Frank didn't have anymore. The kid grabbed Maria's wrist, twisted it until she cried out. "You're not calling anybody." Frank's coffee cup hit the floor. "Let her go." His voice was different now, steadier, colder. "Or what, Grandpa?" Hit that like button if this story got you hooked, because what happened next would make national news within 48 hours. Frank had promised. Dr. Reynolds He wouldn't fight anymore. Had promised his ex-wife, his daughter, himself. But watching that kid twist Maria's arm brought back muscle memory that 12 years couldn't erase. I said, let her go. The dark-haired one laughed. Make me soldier boy. Tyler kept filming. This was content to him. Entertainment. Frank realized these weren't random thugs. They were kids who'd never faced real consequences. Kids who thought the world was their playground. Your dad teach you to hurt women? Frank asked Tyler. My dad's Senator Morrison, Tyler said, like it was supposed to mean something. He teaches me that guys like you are broken toys the government threw away. Senator Morrison. Frank knew the name. The man who'd voted against the last 3 veteran health care bills. Who'd called PTSD a convenient excuse for bad behavior on live television. The irony wasn't lost on him. Tyler Morrison, Frank said. I should have guessed. The dark-haired one tightened his grip on Maria's wrist. She whimpered. Look at me when I'm talking to you, old man. Frank looked. And for the first time in months, the flashbacks didn't come. The rage did, but it was focused, controlled, purposeful. What would you do in our hero's place? Frank would later wonder if anyone watching the footage asked themselves that question. Frank took one step forward. This is your last chance to walk away. Or what? You'll call the cops? They won't believe some washed-up killer over a senator's son. Tyler lowered his phone slightly. Besides, who's going to see this video anyway? Just us? That was their second mistake. The first was touching Maria. Frank moved faster than his bad leg should have allowed. 12 years of physical therapy had taught him to compensate. 12 years of combat training never really left his muscle memory. He grabbed Tyler's wrist, the one holding the phone, twisted it the same way the dark-haired kid was twisting Maria's. Tyler yelped, dropped the phone. It clattered across the floor, still recording. Now we're even, Frank said. The dark-haired one shoved Maria hard into the cigarette display and launched himself at Frank. Youth versus experience. Speed versus knowledge. But Frank had forgotten one thing. There were 2 of them. Tyler recovered faster than expected, caught Frank from behind while his friend threw the first punch. Frank's head snapped back, blood blooming from his nose. But he didn't go down. Stop. Maria screamed from behind the counter. You're killing him. The beating lasted 93 seconds, according to the timestamp on the security camera. Tyler held Frank while his friend, Marcus Webb, they'd learn later, used him as a punching bag. Ribs, stomach, face. Professional work from kids who'd clearly done this before. But something strange happened around the 60-second mark. Even as they hit him, even as his vision blurred and his legs gave out, Frank kept positioning himself between them and Maria. When Marcus tried to move around him to get to her again, Frank would shift, block, protect, even bleeding, even falling. Even when Tyler whispered, "This is what happens to murderers," in his ear, Frank never stopped shielding that terrified girl behind the counter. The camera captured it all. Frank Garrison, Purple Heart recipient, taking a beating that would leave him hospitalized for 8 days, and never once moving away from the young woman he'd sworn to protect. They left him unconscious on the floor, Tyler grabbing his phone. On the way out, "Delete that footage and we'll forget this happened," Marcus told Maria. "Nobody will believe you anyway." But Marcus Webb had made the same mistake politicians always made. He underestimated the power of truth. Maria didn't delete the footage. She called 911, then her manager, then the local news station her cousin worked for. By the time the paramedics arrived, she'd already emailed copies of the security video to 3 different reporters. Frank woke up in County General with 2 broken ribs, a concussion, and a detective who wanted to know if he was pressing charges. Who were they? Detective Sarah Chun asked. Frank's left eye was swollen shut. His lip was split. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. Rich kids who thought they owned the world. We got IDs from the gas station footage. Tyler Morrison and Marcus Webb. You know those names mean something in this town, right? Frank knew. Senator Morrison had been on every political talk show for the past year, building his base for a presidential run. His platform included cutting veteran benefits and ending the culture of victimhood in America. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next, because what Frank said to that detective would change everything. I don't care whose kids they are, Frank said. They hurt Maria. That's all that matters. But the Morrison family cared very much. By the time Frank was released from the hospital 3 days later, the story had exploded across social media. The security footage went viral within hours. Hashtag Purple Heart Frank became a trending hashtag. The contrast was devastating. An old soldier protecting a young woman while taking a brutal beating from a senator's son. Senator Morrison's first response was predictably tone deaf. My son made an error in judgment, but this veteran's military record should be thoroughly investigated before we make him into some kind of hero. The error in judgment comment lasted exactly 6 hours before Morrison's staff forced him to retract it. The video was too clear, too damning. Tyler and Marcus weren't defending themselves. They were beating an old man who never once tried to hit back. Frank's daughter called him for the first time in 2 years. Dad, I saw the news. Are you okay? His ex-wife sent flowers to the hospital. The card read, "Still proud to have been married to a real hero." Dr. Reynolds visited on the second day. How are you handling all this attention, Frank? I'm not a hero, Frank said, the same thing he told every reporter who tried to interview him. I just didn't want him to hurt Maria. You could have walked away. No, Frank said quietly. I couldn't. The political fallout was swift and merciless. Senator Morrison dropped out of the presidential race within a week. Tyler Morrison was arrested and charged with assault. Marcus Webb, whose father owned 3 car dealerships in town, suddenly found his family's advertising contracts canceled across 2 counties. But the moment that would define everything came. During Tyler Morrison's arraignment, the kid's lawyer argued that his client was just defending himself against an unstable veteran. Frank was sitting in the gallery, still wearing bandages. When he heard that, what do you think the antagonist deserves? Frank would never answer that question publicly. But everyone in that courtroom saw his face when Tyler Morrison looked back at him and mouthed "baby killer" one more time. The judge saw it too. He set bail at $50,000 and added community service at the VA hospital to Tyler's eventual sentence. Maybe you'll learn something about the men and women you seem to enjoy attacking, Judge Williams said. 3 weeks later, a reporter from CNN finally cornered Frank outside Murphy's gas station. He was there for his usual Tuesday visit. Same time, same routine. Maria was back at work, though she still flinched when the door chimed. Mr. Garrison, the whole country is calling you a hero. Your actions that night have inspired thousands of veterans and civilians alike. Do you have anything to say about your courage under fire? Frank looked at the reporter for a long moment. Behind him, Maria was restocking the coffee station, trying to pretend she wasn't listening. The Purple Heart was still pinned to his baseball cap, a little more tarnished now, but still there. When he finally spoke, his words would be replayed on every news channel for the next 48 hours. They'd be printed on T-shirts and shared across social media. They'd become a rallying cry for veterans across the country. I've never run from fire before, Frank said simply. Wasn't about to start with those kids. He turned and walked back into the gas station, where Maria was waiting with his usual coffee and exact change sitting on the counter. The reporter stood outside, trying to process what she'd just heard. Not a speech about duty or honor or patriotism. Not a condemnation of his attackers or their privilege. Just a simple statement of fact from a man who'd spent his entire adult life standing between danger and the people he'd sworn to protect. The security camera was still recording when Frank bought his coffee that night. Still recording when Maria said, "Thank you," and he replied, "Just doing my job." Still recording when a 60-year-old Purple Heart recipient with 2 broken ribs and a face full of stitches walked back out into the Virginia night, having reminded an entire country what quiet courage looked like. Tyler Morrison would serve 6 months in county jail and 200 hours of community service. Marcus Webb got probation at a civil lawsuit that bankrupted his family's business. Senator Morrison never held public office again. Frank Garrison went back to his Tuesday routine at Murphy's gas station, where Maria always had his coffee ready, and the exact change waiting on the counter. He never gave another interview, never wrote a book, never appeared on talk shows or political panels. But every year on the anniversary of that night, flowers would appear at the gas station. Purple Heart recipients from across Virginia would stop by to shake his hand and buy coffee from Maria, who still worked the night shift and still believed in heroes, because some fires never stop burning, and some people never stop running toward them.